I think that's ridiculous. I think a lot of the celebrity chefs, they're not overweight. They're actually quite fit. A skinny chef or a chef who's in shape is someone who actually knows how to moderate and not go too overboard and indulge in all the foods that we're surrounded by all the time. Things that are saturated in seed oils are almost repulsive to me now. Knowing how toxic these kinds of ingredients are, it changes your palate. 85% of our diet for millions of years was primarily meat. You realize how little we're educated in terms of nutrition, and salad doesn't work. People don't want to see a lot of vegetables. People actually do seeing large cuts of meat. It's been a roller coaster. To tell you the truth, it's hilarious how people eat in their cars in the U.S.
All right, welcome. Today we've got with us Marco Gomez, who's actually joining us from Paris, France. And so I said it's bonsoir, or I guess it's later in night there. So,
no, bonsoir is correct, yes.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much. And you?
I'm also doing quite well. What brought you to Paris? I did this out of curiosity.
About a year ago, I applied for a job at a food media company, and we make short food videos for social platforms like TikTok, Facebook, and we follow a strict algorithm that changes every day. So it might not be the healthiest food that we're cooking, but we have to follow the algorithm, like I said, in order to appease the advertisers and generate revenue that way. I'm originally a chef by trade, and I wanted to get over to Europe, especially France, because it's the culinary mecca of the world, and experience life over here, and especially the food and the food culture most of all. So my job, actually, they set me up with the first 3 months free of rent. They relocated me here, and I figured that was my doorway into Europe. I'd never been to Europe before, and I really wanted to discover the lifestyle over here. Like I said, the food culture, and I love to travel. I live nomadically, and so actually being a year over here in France has actually been quite a long stay for me. I usually bounce around every 6 months or so. So I'm very comfortable here right now and really enjoying life.
Yeah, you mentioned like the social. I've been getting for some reason, I keep getting these Jacques Pepin videos of him cooking various things at home. He's that obviously well-known, famous French chef. But
love his videos.
Yeah, he's quite entertaining and seems like a really nice guy. But what got you into being a chef in the first place? How did that come about?
So I grew up in Maine, grew up on just a small 1-acre plot of land. My mother, she worked at a local diner as a server for 40 years, and my dad grew a garden in the backyard, raised chickens. And so I always had a really close connection with the source of my food and where it came from. My father always put a really big emphasis on the quality of food and where it comes from. And I think that's where my love for food came from, and hence why I became a chef. I think also the bounty of seafood that came from the cold waters of the ocean. I grew up 5 miles away from the ocean, and being surrounded by all the wholesome food, I think really just instilled a passion for not only the quality of food, but where it comes from, the source of where we get our ingredients.
How long are you likely to stay in France? Is it indeterminate, or just is there a fixed time you're going to stay there?
It's indeterminate. I originally planned to be here for a little while and bounce around Europe. Like I said, it's my first time being in Europe, and I wanted to do some traveling. And initially, I wanted to travel around to different farms in Europe and learn about the different farming styles and practices of the agriculture in Europe. But I got comfortable with the job that I'm at now. It's a refreshing change of pace from the food service industry. I spent 20 years as a chef in the food service industry. And as you probably know, that can be quite demanding and long hours, late nights. And right now I work a 9 to 5, and I really like the people I work with. It's not so stressful. It's fun. And it's, like I said, it's a refreshing change of pace from the grind that is the food service industry. And recently I met a French woman, and I've started to settle down with her and the things you do for love, especially in Paris. So I'm really getting comfortable with that lifestyle over here.
Yeah, as someone who's married to a French woman, I understand.
Yes, I remember reading about that in your book.
One thing, well, maybe you can comment on this. Traditionally, unless I'm mistaken, French cooking involves quite a bit of saturated fat, which has been vilified here in the United States. Is that still the case over there, what you're saying?
It still is the case. However, the whole ecological aspect and the environmental effect, apparently, that animal products have on the environment has really seeped into the media here. And people really, they're very conscious of their meat consumption now. And it's just like the US. There's a lot of misinformation around animal products, and people over here assume the same, that if you consume less animal products that you're going to be healthier. However, what I do see is not so many seed oils. There's not a lot of seed oils. There's a lot of olive oil. There's still a lot of butter being used here. And really, there's not a lot of fried food consumption. And you see a lot more fit people in general over here. It's the population seems to be pretty slim. And I think that's attributed to portion sizes, as well as the minimal use of seed oils.
Yeah, I've been in the last decade. I've been to France 4 or 5 times. I was recently. The last I was there was this past August, and yeah, it's remarkable. There are people that are overweight, but you don't see it to the level that you see, like for instance, in the United States. You just don't see these massively morbidly obese people walking around like we do so much in the United States. So there's clearly a difference. And one thing that struck me, I remember watching television, and I think, like, I saw an advertisement come on, and it was for like some junk food, and they literally had a warning at the bottom of it saying this food is bad for you. Do you see that on the TV there?
Yes, and they actually have a grading system for all the products that you buy in stores. It's from A to E. And A, obviously, if it's a lot of green vegetables, and meat, unfortunately, is a B. It should be an A, should be an A plus. But yeah, all food items have to have that grade on them. And yes, there are warnings on Coca-Cola, candy, and things like that, which I think is great. I think that the U.S. should adopt that policy, that whole system. That would be a great step in the right direction.
Yeah, as opposed to banning these foods, because I'm opposed to food bans, but I think at least
I am too.
Letting people know that this food has these potential issues for you. And obviously, we keep seeing these, you mentioned seed oils, but there are a lot of foods that, particularly processed food and ingredients, that are allowed in the U.S., which are just not allowed in Europe. Have you noticed a difference in that?
Yes, and the quality overall of ingredients is substantially better than the U.S. All of the fruits and vegetables actually taste like fruits and vegetables. The quality of the flour, the quality of the grains is so much better. I'm not a strict carnivore. I'm surrounded by all these delicious bakeries everywhere, and I'll have a croissant once in a while. And it doesn't seem to have the same kind of like heavy bloating effect that, say, American bread would. And another thing that's quite remarkable is I don't see celiac disease over here, and I don't see I see very little gluten intolerance. It's almost unheard of in this population, which is it's quite remarkable when you see how prevalent it is in the U.S. now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, like I mentioned, my wife is from France, and she will not eat bread unless she goes back to France or Europe because of the same issues.
I don't blame her.
Here in the U.S., it causes all kinds of problems. When she goes there, she has that. She's like her little treat over there. But yeah, you're right. There are obviously patisseries and boulangeries and everything all over the place there where you can get all these various.
And like I said, I think there's so much more of an appreciation for food culture and quality, and not just what is consumed, but how it's consumed. There's so much more emphasis on dining, sitting down and with a family. And my girlfriend, she talks about how it's hilarious how people eat in their cars in the U.S. She considers that blasphemy, eating something in your car, while she thinks that, and most French people do, that it should be eaten sitting down at a table with other people in a communal kind of environment. And they have a phrase, bon appetit. It's enjoy your meal. And that's said amongst everyone in the culture. And I think that goes to show you, it speaks to how much they appreciate the communion of food and the quality of the meals that are consumed.
What is your personal, obviously you are in favor of eating meat, and you sound like you do a fairly meat-centric diet.
Yes.
What has been your evolution in diet and food thinking over these? Because obviously as a chef, you would have been exposed to a whole hell of a lot of different dietary strategies. How's that evolved?
Yes. It's been a roller coaster, to tell you the truth. When I was in high school, I suffered from weight gain. I gained a lot of weight when I went through puberty. And I kept that weight on through high school. And then I experimented with these diets these low fat diets where I consumed just mainly vegetables, a little bit of chicken, and maybe just a small amount of pasta. And I lost a lot of weight doing that, but it was just because I was restricting calories heavily and so on. But over the years, I tried veganism. I did that for about 4 months, and I've never been more tired in my life. I ate a lot of beans, and those gave me a lot of troubles. And that's when I realized that beans really aren't compatible with my digestive system. And even though my father, he grows these excellent kidney beans, makes amazing kidney beans, makes amazing baked beans, I can't eat them. They're too problematic. But as a chef, it's when I first heard about this carnivore diet, it was about 4 years ago. It was on the Joe Rogan Experience with you. And I honestly thought that it was a joke. I thought this is some counterculture to the vegans. And obviously it didn't take much for me to look into it and realize that looking into the history of the human diet, of the ideal human diet, and how 85% of our diet for millions of years was primarily meat, it all made sense. I connected the dots, and you realize how little we're educated in terms of nutrition and mainly the history of diets. Everyone just assumes that we've been eating plants for millions of years, and that's just not the case. So as a chef, yes, it is somewhat heartbreaking to learn that all of these ingredients could possibly be causing autoimmune illnesses and are contributing to them and causing a lot of issues. But it is the truth, and I need to find a balance and find a way to incorporate those principles in order to help others.
Yeah, and as far as, again, you said when you tried the vegan diet, you said it just didn't work for your digestive tract for whatever reason. You've modified to a more carnivorous style diet? Has that had any benefits for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So much more energy, so much more clear-headed. I'm able to think better, perform better, sleep better. It's really remarkable how meat really does contain all of the essential nutrients and vitamins and minerals and calories that the body requires to thrive. And it was a little over a year ago, I did a strict carnivore for about 3 months. And I didn't get tired. I remember after the second month, once I had adjusted in my workouts, I really wasn't reaching a ceiling. I felt like I could just keep going and going. My endurance was great. And it really is, it's eye-opening once you're able to adjust to the diet and reap the benefits.
How do you find the French meat, and how challenging is it to be fairly carnivorous over there?
It's not that challenging, actually. There's a lot of butcheries everywhere. They've got excellent meat. A lot of it is grass-fed. It tends to have more of a gamey taste, more of a grassy finish to it, but I like that. And a lot of the dairy has that same kind of flavor profile to it. And it's actually not hard at all. Like I said, there's a butchery on every corner, just like there's a bakery on every corner. And it's very easy to be a carnivore in France and most of Europe, I'm discovering.
Yeah, when I was in Lille, which is in the north of France. And yeah, I walked to the butcher, and they had many, and in this little, I was actually in Roubaix, which is a little town near there. And they had 25 butchers probably in town. They're small, and so they used to have these butchers that were specifically for horses because they would have a lot of horse meat, and I don't think they do those anymore, but that was, I can't remember.
No, I haven't seen a lot of horse meat. Down in Spain, but I haven't seen.
When I was there, there's a like Auchan, which is like this one of the big giant supermarket, I've
got an Shawn right down the road.
Yeah, I saw horse meat in there, but that was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Maybe they've stopped doing that. I'm not sure.
All right. Yeah, I saw a calf's brain the other day in Shawn.
Yeah. As a, you said 4 years ago, you discovered this, you implemented it at some time ago. Did that change the way you cooked a little bit? Were you changing menus? Were you in a position where you're making menus and stuff like that?
Not so much. It's very difficult, the food service industry, to make those kinds of changes. But for myself, most certainly, it's changed the way I cook. It's changed the way I cook for family and friends. I really try to promote an animal-based diet. But my goal now at the food media company that I work at is to try and introduce a more keto, more animal-based channel and feature recipes that are centered around an animal-based diet. Like I said, it's difficult because the algorithm demands a certain or a specific type of video in order to appease the advertisers. It's a very complicated system making content for social media, but I'm really looking forward to pitching that and getting that underway. And I think the owners of the company would be on board because they trust my palate and they trust my accolades.
Just as a chef, because I know how to cook a steak. I cook gazillions of steaks and I'm pretty decent at that. But as far as like different flavors, there's different fats. I know confit ducks and things like that. There's a lot of interesting and novel ways that maybe most people aren't aware of to use animal foods. Can you maybe discuss some of that maybe the average person doesn't really utilize or know about?
Yeah, a lot of smoked meats, a lot of barbecue meats without any of the sugar or too much of the seasoning can be obviously really delicious. Some of my favorite foods, I think there are a lot of different Americans' favorite foods, barbecue foods, smoked foods, a lot of braised foods. If you're not using too much wine or things like that, can be really delicious and actually break up the monotony of a steak or just a seared meat. I tend to use a lot of herbs. I think herbs can really offer a lot of flavor to meats, and especially if you're slow cooking in fats, animal fats, of course, beef tallow, duck fat, like you said, you can incorporate herbs in there and it'll really infuse the meat with that herbaceous herb flavor. Things like rosemary, thyme, sage. I love those three herbs with any kind of meat. They can really offer a really distinct flavor. And like I said, mix up the monotony. So it doesn't really take a whole lot of ingredients to incorporate variety in the carnivore diet. But like I said, some herbs that aren't really problematic with the digestive system, I think can go a long way.
I've heard this rumor, maybe it's true. There's a chef's hat, right? A traditional chef's hat. It's got those little folds in there. I was told that every fold represents a way you know how to cook an egg. Is there any validity to that, or is that just a kind of a wives' tale?
I've never heard that before. That's pretty interesting. I like that. I only know about, I would say, 7 or 8 ways to cook an egg. So if there's 7 or 8 folds in that hat, I'm sure there are more than that.
I think there's more. Yeah. There might be several different, just kind of weird ways to do it. But what about in your diet? So obviously you're including, I assume, a lot of beef or lamb is quite good in Europe in general, particularly depending on where you go. What do you include in your diet these days?
So I'm including primarily beef. I prefer beef. My body reacts the best to beef. And I'd say 4-legged ruminants in general, goat, lamb, things like that. I don't do really well with pork or chicken. I think that really is because of the diet that they're fed. I think chickens and pigs eat more grain and have a more varied diet than cows. I know cows can primarily eat just grass and sometimes they're finished on grain at the end of their lives. But I think what I'm learning is that the more exclusive the ruminant's diet is to grass and things like that, the better my body reacts to it. And I still love pork occasionally. Chicken, not so much. Like I said, I find chicken to be somewhat boring, although a good roast chicken once in a while is delicious. I grew up on chicken. My father raised chickens my entire childhood, and I would help process them and butcher them. And that's actually where I became introduced to the sacrifice that is necessary for animal consumption. And chicken can still be good occasionally, but like I said, I primarily rely on ruminants, goat, lamb, sheep, mutton, and beef.
Yeah, fair enough. And what about things like, because France, as far as cheese is concerned, you'd be hard pressed to find a country that's more cheese centric than France is. Are you including any of the dairy products or eggs or things like that?
I love cheese. And like you said, there's such a variance in cheeses over here. And I was in Spain for 2 weeks recently, and they've got some cheeses. They've got Manchego and things of that that sort. But I actually had a cheese deficiency when I was down there. And as soon as I got back to France, I went to the fromagerie and I got 3 or 4 different types of cheese and just indulged. I do find that it is a little bit difficult to digest at times. I think when I eat cheese, I feel like I need to incorporate a few leafy greens into my diet. What's your opinion on fiber? Some sources you hear that it's necessary, and then other sources it's not necessary. And it's for me the jury's still out. But
yeah, my opinion on that, based on observation, is it's not necessary. And I think in the general sense of a diet, it's conditionally beneficial. And I think I really leave it to person's own individual response to that, because there are people that clearly do better without fiber, and there's some people that tolerate it. So I just leave it at that. Let me ask you, there's always a sort of saying, because you look like you're pretty much in shape and stuff like that. I've always heard, never trust a skinny chef. And were you ever a heavy chef, or what do you think about that?
I did gain some weight at one time back when I didn't exercise, and if I don't exercise, I really pack the pounds on because I do love to eat. So I really do have to monitor that. But I think that's ridiculous. I think most of the successful chefs that you see, a lot of the celebrity chefs, they're not overweight, or they're actually quite fit. That's a ridiculous statement. I think a skinny chef, or a chef who's in shape, is someone who actually knows how to moderate and manage their calories and not go too overboard and indulge in all the foods that we're surrounded by all the time. That is a funny saying. And I actually do. There are a couple of chefs that I do follow who are quite big. But I'd say so most of the successful chefs are quite trim and in shape, because it actually requires a lot of stamina and endurance to work successfully in the food service industry. It's almost like a sport. And so if you're not in good shape, then you're actually going to suffer.
Yeah, it's interesting, because obviously, as part of the job being a chef, I assume you got to taste what you're cooking. You got to get an idea what you're tasting. You're constantly probably tasting things and adjusting as things go by. And I just wonder if your taste changes, because I know a lot of people, like if they're used to eating like a standard American diet, their palate has been desensitized to sugar and all this kind of garbage you're constantly. And then when you no longer eat that, all of a sudden things taste a little different to you. Did you experience any of that?
Absolutely. I know that fried foods, things that are saturated in seed oils, are almost repulsive to me now. And I think that a lot of that goes along with the psychological aspect of knowing how toxic these kinds of ingredients are. And I think that plays into it. But it certainly does. It changes your palate when you start to really start to pay attention to the ingredients that you're putting into your body. And yeah, I've definitely found that I have more of a heightened sense of taste to sugar as well. The more you eliminate sugar, the more you try to moderate your sugar intake, the sweeter things are. Even just a section of an orange or a clementine can really just pop you with a really sweet just accent on your tongue. That's definitely true. And in a good way. I think my palate has become even more sensitive and even more refined now that I'm eliminating a lot of the junk, a lot of the crap, and focusing on the more wholesome, nutrient-rich ingredients.
You mentioned that in France, at least, there's not such a heavy reliance on these sort of really cheap oils like the soybean oil and canola, which often are. That's just what U.S. restaurants typically use as a default, just because they cost. So I think it's because of cost constraints. How does that impact the quality of the food and then the cost of the food? Like if you go out to eat in a restaurant, is it prohibitively more expensive, or is it just a kind of a minor difference?
No, I really don't notice a difference. The portion sizes are definitely smaller here, but the prices are, I think, reflect that as well. It's the quality of the fruits and vegetables is just overall better, like I said, because there's more of an appreciation for it. There's more of a respect for the process of acquiring these ingredients, growing them, cultivating them. And so, no, I don't really notice a big price difference. Beef and other ruminant animals is about the same price that it is in the U.S. I'm not quite sure what the cost of beef is per pound now in the U.S., but it's very similar. And I really think that's because across the board, these systems for producing these ingredients is pretty much the same.
I've heard, maybe limited to maybe some of the nicer upscale establishment, if you order a steak bien cuit, well done, they'll turn you away. They'll basically recommend. Is that true, or is that just conjecture?
I wouldn't know because I would never order a well done steak. But no, I don't think so. I think that's a myth. If you're there, if you're a paying customer, they will serve you a well done steak. But yeah, don't expect it to taste great because you're killing all the good ingredients and the good nutrients in that steak if you cook it well done, and all the flavor.
Yeah, that's fair enough. There's a question here from Hannah asking about chicken skin. Can you see a use for it, eating it? Is it obviously, I think it provides a nice, if you eat chicken, I don't eat a lot of chicken, but thoughts on, or duck perhaps. Duck to me is preferable to chicken, but what are your thoughts around chicken skin, duck skin, things like that?
I think it's the best part. Absolutely. I think that's obviously a lot of the fat is in the skin, and I think it tastes great because it has a lot of nutrients in it, and your body's basically telling you to eat it. That's why it tastes so great. And yeah, I think any kind of skinless chicken is going to lack a lot of taste and it's not going to be as moist. It's not going to have as much textural variation. So definitely include the skin. Don't take the skin out. Actually, really crispy chicken skin, you can make chips out of those. Put them in the oven, put a little bit of salt on them, and cook them low and slow, and they'll dry right out and crisp up, and you can have chicken chips, carbohydrate free.
Yeah, and that's interesting because in the U.S. we went through, and we still are, this sort of low-fat, skinless, boneless chicken breast phase. And right. my assumption, that's probably not as common in France. It's probably more chicken with skin on. And is that fair to say or no?
Yes, it is. A lot of the chicken comes whole. You can get a boneless, skinless chicken breast, but like you said, it's not as common. There's not a whole section devoted to boneless, skinless chicken breast and skinless chicken protein in the supermarket, especially the butcher. If you go to the butcher, you won't be able to find a boneless, skinless chicken. They're selling the whole chicken or chicken quarters or chicken halves.
Yeah, you mentioned the company you're working for. It's part of a social media, I guess, putting out food type videos and whatnot, and that the advertisers direct the food. It's not so much because it's healthier or it even tastes better. It's just, this is what the advertisers pay for, and this is what we've got to do. How much? How does that work? Do they say, like, I mean, you said there's an algorithm which somebody has developed. I guess the company says we get X amount of money from these guys, so we have to. We're destined to put 20% of our content from these guys. Is that how that works, basically?
Yes, and it changes every day. It really depends on like the flow of traffic for these social platforms and how many people are watching. It really depends on views. We're in the business of views, unfortunately. And most people want to watch really large, oversized, cheesy fried things. They want to see the cheese pull apart and things get fried, and lots of carbohydrates, lots of starches, and mostly unhealthy food is what's going to draw people's attention. But like I said, I really want to try and push a more carnivore style channel, or even to start with keto. I think a keto based channel would be beneficial. There
is I see these videos, these like steak channel and things like that. And it's pretty cool. It visually is attractive to me as a meat eater. I see these, gorgeous briskets being all the juice and a nice, well-prepared entrecote or ribeye or something like that. I guess you said on views, do you have an idea what things don't view very well? If somebody sells like a salad, is the people like, I don't want to watch that? Or what do you see that doesn't work well?
Yeah, so actually, yeah, you're right. Salad doesn't work well. People don't want to see a lot of vegetables. People actually do seeing, like you said, they like seeing large cuts of meat. And there are quite a few videos that we do with large cuts of meat. A lot of we've got an American smokehouse close to where we work, where we source a lot of brisket from, because people want to see like large briskets being shredded by hand. Seafood actually doesn't do very well for some reason or another. People, I guess there really isn't a large population of seafood lovers. And that does make sense because it seems to be one of those common food dislikes amongst the general population is seafood in general. And I think honestly, a lot of like raw poultry, raw ingredients, raw meats, people don't want to see. They obviously they want to see you be wearing gloves and being hygienic when handling these meats. But I would say lots of vegetables, salads, and seafood. People really aren't too keen on videos containing those ingredients.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think about that. Yeah, if I see like fish, it doesn't really do much for you visually. It's just not
No,
that exciting, and certainly not for me, vegetables. And like I said, I think the things that I'm just thinking, just pure from a visual standpoint, I certainly like looking at a nice juicy hunk of meat, maybe even a hamburger or a steak or a dessert. Those are and you're right, probably some cheese. Those are probably the only things they're all high energy. They're energetically dense foods. They're high in calorie, high in fat, or dessert side high in sugar. That's what I guess visually appeals to us. And I think we seek energy because we're thinking like, what's going to provide me fuel because like protein powder, yeah, it's structure. And I know it's in meat and I know it's good for me, but I don't really get excited about looking at protein. You get excited looking at the energy, right? And I think
right.
that's
No, that's a very interesting point. I didn't think of it that way, but I think you're onto something there when you see something that is dense with energy and dense in calories.
Well, I think that's what drove early human foraging was I need energy because you think about it, leaves, they don't taste good on their own. You can't no one's going to tell me that spinach by itself with no dressing is pleasingly tasty. I don't know. There's maybe some weird rare person that says that, but until you dress it up with olive oil and balsamic vinegar and
almonds,
pepper and salt
cheese, yes.
and eggs and bacon and whatever else, goat cheese, then it's palatable. But by itself, man, it's just like, ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, and as you probably know, most of these modern vegetables were cultivated. They didn't even exist prior to hundreds or a few thousand years ago. It wasn't part of the realistic sort of palate, I think. So you said you're involved with this. You've got a French girlfriend now. Does she look at your diet and go, what the hell's wrong with you? Where's all the bread and all the other stuff? Or what is her thoughts?
Interestingly enough, I never really, I didn't want to force it on her, but I think I'm pretty active. I stay in shape. I'm health conscious. And I think that this is actually one of the things that attracted her to me. And when I started speaking about this carnivore diet, she became interested and she actually has endometriosis. And I didn't really even know what it was until she told me about it. And then I did a little bit of research and found out that 10% of young women have this, and that's only what's reported. I'm sure it's even more prevalent than 10% of the population, and even at 10%, that's an epidemic. I think that's something that we should really be looking into and really trying to figure out the source of this. And it was a month ago, she asked me if I could coach her and help her with the carnivore diet. So actually next month, we're going to be doing, unfortunately, we didn't do the World Carnivore Month in January, but next month, February, we're going to do carnivore together. She's really interested in it. And so I'm super pumped about that she wants to get on board with it. And like I said, I never forced it. And I just educated her about it a little bit. And she's interested. She wants to give it a try and see if it can relieve some of her symptoms. And I wanted to ask you about that because I know in your book, you have one of your anecdotal stories is about a woman who does have endometriosis, who did try the carnivore diet. And it did alleviate a lot of her symptoms and almost reverse her condition. And I've done a little more research. I'm familiar with Dr. Kiltz. He's an OBGYN doctor, and he believes it's a bowel disease. And so I'm really curious as to what you think and see and what other cases you've run into or you've encountered with endometriosis.
Yeah, I've definitely seen quite a few women with endometriosis get significantly better by altering their diet. That does occur. As far as why and speculate, I can't say for sure. I'm sure there's hormonal factors that include probably a relationship with insulin. Insulin resistance probably has something to do with that. But yeah, it would be interesting. What I would suggest is if she does decide to do it, probably 3 months is probably the time frame it may take before she potentially may see resolution on that. So if she can stick it out for 90 days and then make a decision on, is it effective or not? Because I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think sometimes too short, like you mentioned, 2 months to transition or something like that. You may take some time there depending upon what her baseline health and diet was. So that's of interest. Interestingly, I know my book was just recently translated into Polish. It's also in Hungarian, it's in German, and I think it's going to be soon translated into Spanish and French and perhaps even Portuguese. So if there's a French version, that would be, I'm sure she reads English because most young French people are pretty fluent in English, but yes, even still, it might be helpful if it's in French, perhaps.
Yes. Fantastic.
Yeah, so that's hopefully coming out. I was talking to I rarely ever talk to the editor, but they just, contacted me the other day and I was asking them about translations because I'm getting a lot of requests about particularly Spanish, and Spanish is such a big language. It's outside of, I think it's English, and then I think it's Mandarin Chinese and Spanish, and I think French is in the top 5 for worldwide languages.
Yeah, I was actually down in Spain for 2 weeks, like I said, and the Spanish language, it's I guess it's part of my heritage. I'm only a quarter Spanish, and unfortunately, it wasn't passed down to me. It wasn't even passed down to my father or his father. But I went to Spain to see where my family came from in Malaga, and it was really remarkable to see actually how many more obese people there are down there, because it's a more impoverished country, and they use a lot of seed oils. A lot of things are fried, and you can make the correlation and see the prevalence of ultra-processed foods there. And like I said, a lot of seed oils, a lot of fried foods. And I didn't realize, living in France for a year, how desensitized I was to seeing that the large population of, or large amounts of obese people. And I thought, this looks like America now, seeing that. And it was quite remarkable. And then you do make those correlations and see the ingredients that are being used and the high amounts of seed oils. And it all starts to make sense.
Actually, I'll see, because I think I'm going to Spain for the first time in my life this coming summer, probably in August.
Right,
so
nice.
We'll see, because we're going to, like I said, my spouse is from France, and she always likes to go back and visit her family once a year. And so we usually go over there. And so she'll spend a couple of weeks in France, and then I'll join her there. And then I think she said she wanted to go see Spain this year. So we'll probably go down and check it out. I'm not sure where yet. We may go to Barcelona or something like that, Madrid, Barcelona, and maybe stay towards the Mediterranean coast. But it'll be interesting to see, because I went to Portugal the year before, and I didn't see a great deal of obesity. And Portugal was a very carnivore friendly place. Obviously, a lot of seafood, being coastal, but they had pretty good meat. I was pretty happy with that. So that's neat to see. Because you said you generally got better mood, energy, and things like that when you went more carnivorous. Were there any major downsides that you encountered?
Like I said, I had a little bit of trouble digesting. I think that can be attributed to the amount of cheese that I ate. I do love cheese. And I found that I needed to incorporate some kind of greens or some kind of fiber in my diet, and in order to digest a little better. That could be due to a number of things. It's not necessarily just because of the meat consumption. I think like I said, if I altered my cheese consumption, I think that would probably help a little bit. What do you think about that?
Again, it's hard to fault somebody living in France to not want to eat the cheese there, because it is so darn good.
Right.
And it has been, what I will see, again, albeit anecdotally, but seen by many people, is cheese for some people can be almost constipating, and reduction of that can be helpful. And I think there's reasons for that. I think maybe it's the morphine-like substances that which are in cheese, which morphine, any opioid will slow our gut down. And then also the fact that calcium can also be a little bit constipating in some cases. I do have a question for favorite cheese while that you found in France. There's different ones. I like Comté is quite good, but
I love Comté. Comté is so good. I'm a big blue fan. I love any kind of stinky blue cheese. So I think Fort is one of my favorites, especially with a steak. I think those two, I think blue cheese was made for steak. And so, yeah, I've got to go with blue cheese, any kind of blue cheese. Perfect.
Yeah, so Roquefort that's a very common one there. There's also wine is another thing that goes well with a steak. And is that something you engage in a little bit?
Yeah. I eliminated alcohol from my diet about 5 or 6 years ago. that really obviously made a huge difference in so many different areas of my life. But a lot of French people, they don't really accept that you don't consume alcohol. If you're offered a glass of wine and you say, I don't drink, they look at you funny and say, what do you mean you don't drink? But I will indulge in a glass of red wine every once in a while if it's really good. And most of the red wine is very good here. So I do cooking with it from time to time. Like I said, incorporating it into braised foods. Beef bourguignon is one of my favorite dishes. It's just beef slow cooked in red wine with different root vegetables and mirepoix and things like that. I'm not opposed to it. I think once in a while, a little bit of red wine with red meat and blue cheese and maybe a little champignon is just unbelievable.
Yeah. Champignon, little mushrooms. I had some really good mountain food in what they call a Pays Basque, or the Basque country down there. It's got some interesting stuff.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah, they're interesting for food there. Oh, what I was going to point out it's interesting with wine and with alcohol in general. Ethanol is basically a liver toxin, which there's no getting around that. But saturated fat has been shown to mitigate that in both human and animal studies. So if you're going to drink a glass of wine, a steak would be a good accompaniment. Just as it's somewhat protective. Not that I'm advocating for drinking a bunch of alcohol, but it is something that has been shown to at least protect the liver against some of the damage induced by ethanol. And they pair well, right? And I do, not often, but rarely, I'll have a glass of wine, and it's maybe once every few months, not very frequent.
And that's another way of your body telling you that this is something maybe tastes good with another thing. Maybe that's your body's way of telling you that it is good for you. It is beneficial. And unfortunately, the pharmaceutical industry and the food service industry and has hacked our brains with sugar and all the ultra processed foods in that way. It might be difficult sometimes to discern what is good for you and what isn't, just based on how it tastes. But in that instance, I think it's pretty foolproof that a glass of red wine with beef is good for you.
Now, you said the company you work for produces basically food videos, I assume, like cooking videos, food videos. Are you physically in them? Is it like you cooking in the kitchen, or what is it?
Yes, it is. It is physically me. Yes. I am one of the chefs in the videos cooking. Yes.
I see. And do you have your own independent, like, social media outside of that, or is it everything through that?
I do not. It's everything through that. I do want to start my own like carnivore cooking channel. I think that would be helpful because I don't see a lot of chefs who are adhering to this diet. I don't know how many chefs you've met who do practice this diet. And maybe, I guess I'm curious as to what their take on it is and how they approach it, if they're really strict or not, and how they're able to balance those ingredients. Have you encountered a lot of chefs doing the carnivore diet?
I'm aware of several okay. that do that. They have some level of strictness. Some of them because of their profession, they're forced to taste things and they have to. But there's guys that are like pretty darn close to being very strict. But again, I don't know that's necessary for everybody. I think that's one of those things where, if you come to what I hope that people learn is that meat is a health food, and eating a lot of it is not a problem. And it's just the other stuff that we've got to reduce in our diet. And meat can help us do that. Meat can help us get rid of the processed garbage because it's satisfying. It actually satisfies, whereas a salad doesn't. A salad leaves you wanting, to say the least. Man, I really want something else. But as far as, what's the name of the internet or social media channel that has you cooking in there?
It's called Chef Club. ChefClub. And
is that Instagram or TikTok, or where's that at?
Yeah, so it's all over. It's primarily on Facebook, but it's on TikTok, it's on Pinterest, it's on Twitter. Basically all these social media platforms you can find it. But like I said, a lot of the recipes that we're doing are not created by me. They're dictated by a specific algorithm, and that changes every day depending on what the level of viewership is. And how many.
So if we get some more meat viewers that are wanting to see meat videos, it might drive the algorithm towards eating more.
Absolutely, that's what I'm talking about. So we go to Chef Club and we just look at the meat videos, and click on those or whatever, it drives the algorithm there. So that'll be interesting. And is it in English? There are a lot of them.
Is it in English or is it in French or is it what? Or is
It's in both. They were seeking American chefs because their market is more prominent in America now. They a lot of the oversized, big, outlandish food that we do tends to do very well in the American market. That's where I come into play. They wanted American chefs. Yeah, there's a French channel and an American channel. Yeah, definitely check it out. The American channel will feature me and a couple other American chefs doing oversized, large cuts of meat.
And you're doing that all in France, locally, obviously. You're over there in some
Yes,
restaurant,
exactly.
commercial restaurant in France. Yeah, in Paris. Awesome.
Yes. We actually have our own studio.
Awesome. Marco, we're running out of time. It's been a wonderful pleasure chatting with you. I don't know, one day maybe I'll eat some of your food at some point. Who knows? Like I said.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me, Dr. Baker.
Awesome. You have a great evening and keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks so much. Take care.